All right. Cool. So okay. Right before we started this stream, I was talking about this whole like. Thank you for being here, by the way.
You're welcome. It's always great to be here.
I think I just like jumped past that first part because you have been on the pod before, right? And like I see you every once in a while.
Yes.
But welcome, Tosh,
Thank you. Thank
otherwise
you. Good
known
to be
as
here.
Tony, in the
Oh, yes. There, I have multiple alter egos,
right,
which makes life fun and interesting.
right.
Because why live one life when you can live
Multiple
ways?
lives, yeah, multiple ways.
Multiple ways, multiple lives.
Born from people remembering your name wrong or something like
Yes. Yes.
that.
Totally.
I like never get the name thing because my name is so like cut and dry. It's Alan or Al.
Oh, okay.
I'll get like Alex.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Do you have a middle name?
Yeah.
What is your middle name?
Zhangxi.
Whoa.
It's
And
Chinese, super
does
Chinese.
it mean anything?
So like basically when you're Chinese, they'll take your last name and then they'll add it on to probably like an older relative's first or middle name.
Okay.
So Zhangxi is kind of like refers to like a document or an article, right? And then Chen Zhangxi, they told me I looked it up. They didn't tell me actually. I looked it up. Oh no, I asked my mom. That's what it was. I Siri'd my mom, mom Siri, Miri. But I asked her and she's like, it means like golden article,
Whoa.
or like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if I were to extrapolate that, it's almost like the way,
Yeah.
or like
Interesting.
and she says she insists that there is a poetic portion of that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, it's interesting to have a middle name or just with middle names in general. I know that in like Hispanic culture and a lot of other cultures, it's like your middle name is like your mom's maiden name and it kind of, you carry on your family legacy with a name.
Yeah.
So I have been told with Chinese, like the last name will be first. And so that's like how things are pronounced.
Yeah.
And it kind of like is an homage to the culture of like you live for your family, like you serve before yourself. And like in a lot of Asian cultures, like that is like the culture is like,
Yeah.
yes, you of course you look out for your own, but like your elders will be first, right? Like
Right.
that is just the vibe. So
And I mean, in terms of like evolution, should you not be building on the work that your elders have
right.
done, right? So the idea is, especially like children of immigrants, they come to this new place, they build a life, they build a family, and then you take that legacy and then you go even further, right? That's the idea.
Yeah.
And then like humanity in general, it's like we all work together and do our best.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
And the only way you can do that is going back to the thing that I was talking about before, is by evolving. And I've seen like this trend, or through all of the content that I've been absorbing in the past like few years, it's like the struggle is what makes you strong. The struggle is what makes it possible for you to like push past things that are kind of trite or unnecessary or just like not really that important, to do what needs to be done. And a lot of people in this world I see, even if they're not feeling like they're suffering because they've come from suffering, you're still going to meet some kind of suffering in this world, and
Right.
you're going to need to push past that to go as far as your human potential can take you.
And if you, I totally agree. And also, like, if you don't push through something that is difficult, that's like suffering, you won't actualize potential. I mean, if we look at nature, there's always going to be something that has to be pushed through. Like a tree has to burst out of the seed, right? If you look at a star, that's an explosion. Like there are things that nature has shown us that it's what we're looking at is not what has. We don't know the complete journey, right? It's like a flower had to start as a seed. So the same thing with our human potential is you can't be human and not suffer.
Right.
It's just not possible. So
But it's so. Oh, let's go. Devola Joe, family equals earthing. That's true. It's true. And there's been kind of, I would say, a war on these things that we're talking about, in my opinion, especially on the internet, of like there's so much comfort giving. There's so much now expectation of comfort. And I know there was a part of my life where I actually had the real thought of being like, oh, well, if it doesn't feel good, I probably don't need to be doing it. You can easily fall into that
Yeah.
by thinking like, oh, well, I'm doing just fine, especially if you have like some kind of privilege.
Sure.
It's easier to just be like, well, I'm fine, I'm gonna be fine, so why not just enjoy my life and just do all the things that make me happy and da 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 da. But it kind of ends up being very like self-centered, and it doesn't add to the community for you just to sit there with a grin on your face, like eating ice cream and going
Right.
on Pornhub, you know?
Right.
Like,
And it's reminiscent of the song by Frank Ocean, Sweet Life,
oh.
where, so I grew up, I didn't grow up, where I lived before moving to the Bay. I was in Ladera Heights, and that song mentions that, right? And because it was in that general area. And during the time I was living there, he released Channel Orange. And that song is about people who just like lived in such privilege, because that area is literally the border of like Inglewood. It's the hood. There's like 4 fried chicken places on one corner, and you go on one side and it's like rich black affluent folk and Jewish folk, and then the other side is like the literal hood. And so if you grew up there, if you went to high school there, you probably had friends who were living in both of those worlds.
Yeah.
And so it's such even within a mile, what a different life that you can have. Even in Oakland, we have Piedmont, which is a 1 mile by 1 mile city.
Yeah.
But it's within Oakland, but it's not Oakland, right?
Right.
And Piedmont High School is like a private school, because you can only go there if you're living in Piedmont, but it's a public school. So it's interesting how you can be so sheltered even amongst other people who are suffering. But then again, if you don't have that type of challenge in your life, you're never going to actualize your true human potential.
Right. And so like a lot of times when I do these pods, I don't think it's much of a secret. I really just talk about stuff that I think is interesting because I'm kind of going through it too. Right? So that's where I get my topics from. I'm just like, let me think about the trials in my life, and let's see how like my peers and my community are dealing with these same things.
Yeah.
Right? So like that. Like for example, like in case of motivation. Right? Now I found it's like
Thank you.
Thank you. Devola Joe, I really like the name. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate you, man. Or person. Welcome home. That's what we say. But yeah, it's like motivation is really interesting for me because I kept thinking like, I just gotta find my motivation. I just gotta like get my way. I just gotta get some momentum, and then I'm gonna be good. But like momentum is a dime a dozen type of thing for me. It's like I can get hooked onto anything because I'm that type of person where I could get excited about anything. Placebo is like amazing on me. So it's just but it can leave as fast as it comes because if it's not tied to something concrete, then it would just like it's gone with the wind.
Yeah.
So I found that lately, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but like whatever about motivation that helps in the moment. But for me, it's literally just it all comes back to self-esteem again. And for me, I've been building more and more and more of those things through just working.
I see.
Just like
building more self-esteem, motivation, or both?
All of the above, just by doing work
Yeah.
as best I can and doing it, just like putting my head down and working. And literally, I feel myself building my own self-esteem because I'm now taking more and more and more and more pride in the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Not to say that I didn't like the work that I was doing. I'm just like actually like concentrating and like turning my perspective this way.
Right. Well, I think, when you continue to work, that's like creating momentum, right? And I think it's super sexy to like market motivation as like, you got to do it. And, it's like that toxic positivity of like, you got to have it, you got to keep it going. But just like being human, there are going to be ebbs and flows to motivation and and ambition and let's take weight loss for example. Like a lot of people have issues with it because they bounce back or they're motivated by an event or motivated by whatever, and then they lose it because it takes a lot of time to lose weight, but also takes time to gain weight. So we unconsciously will gain it, right? Like go to parties, we do this, but like to lose it, you have to consciously do that. And when you're conscious about something, it just feels like it takes longer.
And you're suffering more.
Yes.
Out of your perspective.
But you have to continue to do it in order to reach that goal. So, I don't think you're alone in like having, or, you know, feeling like motivation comes when you put in work, and also the feeling of it leaving. I think many people have felt like that, especially as an artist, right? That's what artists chase, is like the creative, you know, that like window, and it's not all the time, but you can still build your momentum by just continuing to work. So
yeah, absolutely. And especially on that artist thing, I've also been that person where I'm just like, when is it going to hit me? I'm just going to relax today. I'm going to let the world come to me. You know, whatever happens, I'm going to take a walk outside. And I love that portion of it. But I think still, like I'm on this grind set now. So I'm kind of like a little turned that way. So now I feel like, well, actually, most of my productivity came through school. And that's because I was regimented. That's because
structure.
Structure. And I'm not saying like we only need structure, because we definitely need relaxation. We definitely need to not be like this to the project the entire time. Right. Like, or what I wasn't trying to say like blind, but like really close face into the project all the time.
Yeah.
You can burn yourself out. But like the work that I did, like it's going back to the work, right? Just doing that gave me clarity into what I wanted to do with all these ideas that were coming around. I had more of an understanding of all the symbolism that I was working with. And so in one way, my mind was just like, oh, this is kind of stagnant. I just kind of know what these things mean, and it's coming like easy but also consistent. And in that moment, my mind was like bored, in a way, right? But now I feel kind of spoiled for feeling that way. Then
I have heard that boredom is very good when it comes to being a creative, because that allows like space for your mind to think of new things. Number two, when you're talking about recreation, the whole point of recreation is to take a break so that when you come back, you can create. So that we have to have both of those things in order to, because you're not a machine, right? Like you can't just continue to make all these wonderful things all the time. Like people who are like that are insane. You know what I mean? Like they're like, you're like a crazy gene, like Basquiat, like amazing work, but very tormented, right? So if you're going to continue to do that, there's other things that are going to fall away. But if you want to be a well-rounded artist, you have to understand that your work is going to come when it comes,
right? And
continue to do it regardless of how you feel,
right?
So,
and I mean, like tying that, what you said about Basquiat, right? So important to my mindset right now. He was like this tortured soul, right? And I think that most people that are, I would even hazard to say the 1% out there of earners, of like inventors, of like people who are pushing like the boundaries, they're all crazy. Yeah. They have to be. They're like
dissociated, right? Because they're now in this world of a creative space. And when you are continuously in your creative space, it is difficult to interact with reality, right? So yeah, I mean, I think of Kanye, who is like, I'm going to share this story. So I had a patient the other day who was on a psychiatric hold, and she was young. And she said, you know, she was like, she was very aggressive, but what she was saying was not making sense. I don't think she slept for like 2 or 3 days. And she said she was just saying like a bunch of like word salad. Then all of a sudden she brings out her phone and she plays an instrumental. I'm like, what's happening? And and then I hear like rapping, and it's her. And I'm
Like
like,
freestyling?
you should no. She
Oh,
was like
no.
recorded herself rapping, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this you? And she's like, yeah, I want to be a rapper. And I was like, okay, if you want to be a rapper, you got to learn how to work with people. Because how can you work with producers if you're going to act like this? How are you going to work with Doja Cat? You know, how are you going to work with other artists if you are not in the room with them? If you're not trying to sleep, if you can't show some sort of professionalism, there's no way that you're going to make it in the industry. You're just going to be another talented artist that no one's ever heard.
Right.
And like totally clicked for her, and she like became like much more cooperative, and like it was like a switch. And I'm like, look at Kanye, he is a genius, and Adidas dropped him billions. You just lost billion, like you went from billionaire to like 100,000aire. I would be happy with 100,000 personally, but like if you've been living a certain life and you get dropped down a couple tiers, that's pretty
That's not just a couple.
bad. Yeah, and you lost your wife, like a lot of these things. How can you can't, geniuses live on islands a lot because they cannot interact the same way, and it's just because they're living in one world. So
I think also though, like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. You must be connected to society in one way or another, right? And things that are normal can seem boring, but things that are normal are good. You know, I used to grow up, obviously, you know, when you're kind of like the black sheep, you're going to grow up and wear that weirdness as like a badge of honor. And I do because I'm also a black sheep, and my mom was a black sheep. She's a black sheep of our family.
yeah.
So I'm like the son of the black sheep. And yeah, I like being different, and I like thinking differently and making those things available to me. But I've also noticed that when I just kind of let that freak flag fly, people think I'm weird.
Yeah.
And that's normal. That's fine. But it's just going to make you lonely after a while, right? Just like, sure, be yourself, do your shit, own whatever you want, own whatever you feel, but realize we do live in a society. And like, I don't know, there are things, some things are black and white.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of non-Americans, when they look at American society or just even Western culture in general, it's very hyper individualized, where you can't really have a hyper individualized society. That's almost like a paradox, because in order to have society, you have to be social, and you know, and be able to have some sort of congeniality, because if everyone is their own thing, then we're all just looking out for ourselves.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And we already know. And all this stuff seems so obvious, but it's just because it's there, right? We're a social creature, right? And I don't think anybody out there is going to be like, nah, we're not social. Everybody's an island, right? We've already kind of proved this is not the case.
Right.
We strengthen ourselves both physiologically and mentally when we're grouped with other people. So just based off of that, right? So it's crazy, because like you think about that crazy 1%, right? They're the reason why we have AI. They're the reason why we have like crazy economy. They're the reason why we're pushing technology and da 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 da. So in terms of evolution, that's great. But like, what about us as humans? What about us? Our most the most human part of us is the community, is the
Right.
love, is the social part of us, I believe.
I agree.
Because other animals are, yeah, they're social and they travel in packs like that, but we have this sort of self-awareness where we can think of ourselves thinking and notice ourselves noticing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that part of it really intrigues me. It's like, so work-life balance, what is that? What does that even mean now? Like,
Yeah.
what is happiness? What is grinding? What is potential? What is all this stuff?
Right. If you just joined us, hello, welcome
Yo,
to
yo.
Baba's house. Thanks for joining us. I think we could say that our theme has been paradox.
Yeah.
Just having like the eternal paradox of being human, and you have to, in order to live, you must die. In order to have pleasure, you must suffer. In order to be creative, you must have, there's a lot of these trade-offs, and it's just the paradox will always exist, and to live yin and yang, life, human life kind of rides that line in between the yin and yang, which is like the paradox, which I find so fascinating, because it's just, hey Ginger.
Yo, what's up, Charles?
It's just, you have to be able to ride that line, and that's like, and I think because you ride that line, you have to have awareness, right?
Yes.
That is the awareness of the balance, or the going in between of those two things. So
If we didn't have the awareness, we would just, I think, be the line, because it would just operate as we operate.
yeah,
We would eat, breathe, poop, and then die.
Yeah.
Right. And mate and stuff like that, like all the regular stuff. But since we have this, and then you ask yourselves that, right? And then we have religion, and we have all this stuff and philosophy and these things.
yeah.
So let me ask you then, what's your paradox? What's your favorite? What paradox is Natasha Mendez dealing with on the day-to-day?
I think that's a good question. You have to give in order to receive.
Ooh, I was literally just thinking about that too.
You really do. You got to give that out, and you will get it back, and give it all. I think even
Pam.
even with like in Christianity, that is like the paradox that Christ teaches, is like you have to give it all, and you're gonna get it back, but you have to like relinquish it,
Right.
and you have to like let that stuff go. So you got to let it go for it to come back. And parents, I'm sure, feel that. Like at one point, your child is not going to be a kid anymore, and you have to allow them to live their own life. And so I think giving to receive has been the paradox that I've been trying to live. And every time that I try to hold on to something or preserve, I find no peace in it,
Right.
and it's very fascinating, because you would think that, like, okay, self-preservation or saving something for yourself is like the normal thing to
It
do.
seems smart.
Right. Exactly. It's like a survival thing, but we are not called to survive. We are called to thrive.
Yeah.
We're called to,
Yeah.
we're not just here to live and poop and eat and mate and
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, we're here to like give life. And so I think that has been something I've been trying to live as much as I can. And every time that I feel like I do that, I get rewarded. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. And I want that for all of us. You know what's funny? Whenever Ginger, now because I know Ginger, whenever she types anything, I just add Ginger to it. You know what I mean? I sprinkle some ginger on it. Ooh, she's a generous giver too, right? I feel like she would be saying something like that. Yeah, we do exist to give. That is a really beautiful thing. And I feel like every time we do these episodes, I have something to take with me, because I'm asking these questions, right? So that's my give, and I get this. So I'm going to take that with me today and think about how I can give and give and give, and not because I need something back, but because it's a better alternative than like turning into Smeagol and just like, no, I got to keep this. No, my love, my affection, my popularity, or whatever it is, my notoriety or something.
Right.
I've got to, it's slipping through my fingers, right?
Right,
And then you're just thinking about loss instead of
Totally
pushing forward. And it creates friction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's dope. How about you guys? What are you guys' paradoxes?
What's your
in the chat?
paradox? What is your paradox that you're living?
Yeah, some of the things that I'm thinking of too. I think in general, the give to get is such a great, encompasses so many things in my life, right? Giving forgiveness, giving just sort of like my time and things like that, where it's tough when somebody is, let's say, not treating you well, and this has nothing to do with my home life, by the way, or anything like that. Just as an example, if somebody's like not treating you well, how do you keep then giving forgiveness?
Sure.
right? And that is something that I've been thinking on for like a little while, where it's like, I could my look, I'm kind of a scrapper, right? So if somebody's not nice to me, my main tendency is to just not be nice back, which is
Sure.
not great.
Sure.
It's not great.
It's a retaliatory.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm always in the mindset of like, well, I'm going to stand up for myself.
Sure.
I'm going to stand up for the people around me, and I'm going to stand up for what I think is right. But, you know, you obviously don't need to be petty. You don't need to be la 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 la, right? Because eye for an eye is not equal.
Right.
But that's kind of how my main reaction is, because I've kind of been like that way growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it really hits me in that way, where it's like, well, if somebody's just determined not to like be nice to you, you just cut them out.
I think we as a society have equated nice as kind, or kind and nice being the same thing. And I want to address this.
What's up, babe?
Le Davolo Joe.
Davolo Joe.
We will address that, but you know, we equate like being nice and kind, and forgiveness. I've heard that forgiveness is a gift that you give to yourself.
Yes.
And so you can forgive somebody for doing something wrong to you, but you don't have to be subjected to that treatment. So to be nice is to say, I forgive you, you're going to do it again, but I'm just going to forgive you every time you do it. To be kind is say, I forgive you, but I'm going to set this boundary because you cannot treat me like that. You are not allowed to treat me like that, because I respect myself, and I want to show you that this type of treatment has consequences.
Right.
So that is the kind thing to do, because that is teaching someone that like, yo, you cannot be treating people like this, because this is what's going to happen.
Right. I'm a very firm believer in setting that example as well. My methods are not always the greatest when I feel constricted, right? When I feel trapped into like, oh, well, I can't express myself in the way that I want to, let's say because we have to be businesslike or whatever.
Sure.
Right? Then it's very tough for me, because it's like, well, they're just doing it again.
Yeah.
And now what am I going to do?
Right. Business is hard. Yeah. When it's in a professional standpoint, but, and to address Davilo Joe, I think to be successful and serve our family, I think we have to figure out what that definition of success is. Because if the definition of success is to provide financial support in, you know, like a very big financial support, then you might have to, you know, you might be spending more hours to get more money. But if the success is to be present with your family, then, you know, to kind of alter what those goals will be. So I think it just is more of like, what can you say about defining success? What is success for serving your family? Because you are serving your family if you're providing for them, right? But that doesn't, even if you're going to be isolated, I think that's like a lot of immigrant, children of immigrants, is a lot of our parents worked, and we never saw them, but they gave us a good life. And like for our parents, that was good enough.
That was the best they could do, I feel.
They just knew that they were in America and they needed to provide and do all of these things. So that's what they have to do.
Right.
I think when now being a millennial, I look at some of my friends who've had generational wealth, and where I'm from, where like my family and how I grew up, you work, you get money, right? And a lot of these generational wealth families, you don't have to work to get money. You invest to make money.
Right.
So you just know where to put all of this money, and that way you could be present with your family. But if you come from a world where like you work, you know, I've read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's all you know, right? You work to like be retired, and then you can, rather than knowing how to build up assets, so that way you can have more wealth and then pass that on.
So your money can make more money.
Exactly.
Right. And that's where that's where that gap happens, right? Because you've built up, let's say, power through the money, and you use that power to do more,
Right.
right?
Right.
I agree, and I want to talk about the other side of that question, of the family side, right? So Dewolo Joe, you're saying I want to be very successful to serve my family, but causes me to overlook and isolate from family. Now, I think when you say overlook or you say overwork, sorry, overwork and isolate from family, um, all of that I think should still be based on communication, right? So if you feel like you're overworking, does your partner also, your children and all this stuff, like, this is something that I think, and I'm not trying to preach or whatever, but I think this is something that could be discussed with a family, and saying like, look, I know I'm gone a lot, or if you're feeling that the family wants you to be around more, or even if you're just feeling you need to be around more, you could just talk it over. And I could imagine being with a partner and being like, look, I know that I'm going to take on this job, let's say, that is going to make me travel a lot. But let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, how does this sit with you? How does this sit with me? Now, your partner may have a problem with that, and you just talk it out, and it's always some kind of negotiation. It's never black and white like that, right? So you can just be like, well, here's my plan. I'm going to be on the road for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, but at the end of that, my plan is to have such and such money. And that'll set us up for this kind of life, and then maybe we can spend more time then. And if that is talked about and agreed upon, then I think it's like less of a blow, it's less of a whatever you want to put on that. But I do understand too that that certain dynamics within the family have been set out by society, right? Like, for example, less so today, but still, like, quote unquote, men are supposed to earn the money and then like, and bring that home and then provide for the family. Right. But I mean, things are the way they are now. Right. It doesn't have to be that way. And if it is, you can still talk about it.
Yeah. And also, I think you've illustrated a very, very good point of like establishing good communication. I love that you said, if we're going to talk about relationships, if you're going to have this job and it's going to require you to travel, that you would speak with your partner and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. What are your thoughts about it? And how can we like come together? Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize, oh, duh, I could talk to my family, or like I could talk about it with someone, or like the people who are involved, because even though it's going to be an imperfect system, or you might not be perfect, at least people know where your head is at. And I think that's like really, really important to at least be able to discuss that. And I'm like, I know Pam and Charles are on this. Like, I really appreciate the way that you raise your family, and like a lot of our friends who have children, and how they raise their children and communicate with them, because it is 100% a team effort. And I now, I work with children a lot, and seeing, especially when they're sick, like seeing parents like, okay, I will do this. I'm going to pick up this kid. I'm going to do this. We're going to do, and like seeing the wheels turn, and like, this is a very stressful moment. Like, your child is very sick, and like to see this teamwork is it's like such a privilege for me to witness, because, I don't have any children, and I'm not married, but or partnered, but it's like good to see this dynamic and understand like these are two individuals coming together to make a plan, and a very important one at that. And if we're going to go back to struggling to become stronger, these are the things that make a couple stronger. Like, of course, you want to have all this fun and like you want to enjoy each other's company, but that's like not the entire relationship. It can never be, right?
No.
But to like make these important decisions together is, even though you might not be happy all the way happy with the decision, that's like so important to be able to discuss. And yeah, I think now that we are living outside of our parents' generation, I don't know if this is your experience, but a lot of that generation had a lot of difficulty discussing their feelings,
Yeah.
emotions, and plans. They just make this grand assumption, and it's like, you stay in your lane, I stay in mine. This is what I assume is happening. And like, no, they're not making any communication.
Right.
Whereas for us, it's like, we communicate literally everything. Like, we post it on Twitter, like every single thought. It's like the complete spectrum of the opposite,
Right.
So to meet that middle is like where communication can like really grow.
Yeah.
And family success, and I think like that's, we're trying to find that balance, Davilo Joe. I think that's what a lot of us want to do, is to do right by our family. And how can we provide and then also be present, because it's not going to be perfect. We're not always going to be doing it right.
Right. It's easy to take on the mindset like, well, this is my role, so this is my cross to bear, and so I just got to do it, and I can't complain, and I can't, like they can't know that I'm having these struggles because this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm supposed to be good at it.
Sure.
But still, I think that along with all of our, like, I don't want to keep saying toxic masculinity and blah blah blah, but like all of that stuff has come to this point where we're just like, oh well, I can't express myself as a dude because then I'm weak, and if I'm weak, I'm useless, and if I'm useless, I might as well be dead. Right? So like there's kind of this lingering mindset, I think, still around, where it's so expensive getting married. Yeah, there's a lingering mindset where it's like you're not supposed to communicate, but I don't know, man. I can't live that way.
No,
I just can't. You feel it welling up inside.
Yeah.
You gotta get it out somehow.
And we're very thankful that you do not live that way. I don't think anyone would say Alan is a bad communicator. I think you're really setting a good example for not just men, but a lot of people, because I appreciate the way that you speak your mind and ask about insight, because it's not as common these days. And I think that's what we're all trying to learn how to do. Well, at least I hope that we're all trying to.
I hope so too.
Learn that.
Thank you. It's hard to live that way.
Yeah.
Why not? Like, my dream is to be, I don't know, maybe that's why I like the East Coast so much. Because you can go over there and just like say whatever, and I don't feel the pretentiousness or like the stifledness on the East Coast, where they're just like, like keeping their mouth shut but smiling.
Yeah.
It's none of that.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you what they think. They're going to tell you what they feel, whether it's like woke or not, or whatever.
Sure.
And I appreciate that on a level where it's like, what you see is what you get a lot of times.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, you got to be street savvy, but like at the same time, it's like that communication really, it makes me feel so comfortable.
I also think that the reason why people like in those East Coast cities are like that is because they have real fucking weather. So it's like that winter was fucking nuts, and it's like you've experienced seasons together, and that in itself is like traumatic, like mini traumas of like, we were snowed in, and then now it's springtime and we can all come out. Like there's like that sense of like collectiveness. Yeah, exactly. Weather trauma bonding.
That's real as fuck.
Yeah. So like, when you're just like, dude, whatever, like, I mean, it could also be super real in a sense, like I lost my loved one because they froze, or like there was a flood. Like I think those things also kind of just make you feel like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to say what I need to say. And one of my, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but one of my friends said in San Francisco, like San Francisco versus New York, San Francisco people are nice, but they're not always kind. New York people are not always nice, but they are definitely kind. And like we said, like we equate nice and kind when those are two different things.
Completely different.
You're being kind is like looking out for, right?
Yeah.
And in the best interest of, where nice is just very surface level. And an example was I think it was like an Instagram video or something where people were not moving out of the way from this ambulance. And the guy, like someone on the PA was like, don't worry, like it might not, it's just your grandma or something. Like somebody was saying like, you don't have to move out of the way. We're just, saving someone's life, you know, like something really cheeky. But it's like, dude, get the fuck out of the way. Like it was, it was a cheeky moment, but like it definitely got cars out of the way, you know. But that's just like the kind of mindset that a lot of those big cities have, is like and I also think specifically New York. New York has a lot of generations in these neighborhoods, and so you're really trying to look out for. There's a certain preservation, or the need for the preservation of culture in these particular neighborhoods, like Washington Heights, for example. A lot of Dominicans there, and so it's just a Dominican borough. You know, even if you're not Dominican, you are Dominican. You know, and then here, like if you're in Daly City, Filipinos are in Daly City. Like it's not a secret, you know, like it's not a secret. There's a bunch of like that. There's these cultures that live in these parts. And so there's a certain like protection and a certain, you know, and yeah, so it's like being nice is not always kind.
It doesn't always serve.
Right. And kindness always serves.
Kindness does serve. Yeah. And I really love that. I mean, maybe we could just end on that. Like kindness will always serve, you know?
Yeah.
If you're looking out for yourself, you know, today, that's fine. If you know, there are going to be days where you literally just need to focus on you.
Right.
But if you can, once you've focused on yourself enough, and you've kind of built a scaffolding or a structure or some sort of structure for you to kind of then stand on, namely your self-esteem, your work ethic, your morals, all of those things. Once you can stand on that stuff consistently, then maybe you can start to think about others, right? You start with yourself, build yourself up, then maybe you can have a family. Then after the family, then maybe you can help your community.
Right.
And after the community, maybe you can go further and further and further, or whatever order I guess you put that in. But it always starts with the self.
If you cannot recognize that you are a human of worth, you cannot possibly give love to other humans. So you have to recognize that for yourself in order to give that to others, right? Because you can't, you know, that adage, love yourself, you know, love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't even know what a self is, how could you love the neighbor? And love is not, you know, again, it's not being nice either, right? It's like, it's also looking out for what's best. And in order to know what's best for someone else, you also have to know what's best for yourself.
Right. Otherwise, you're just if you're treating yourself like crap, how do you think you're going to treat other people when it really comes down to it?
Right.
Like the surface is different, but how long are you going to be able to keep that up?
Yeah.
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 Cool, man. Stay kind.
Yeah. Kindness serves.
Kindness is
it gives
awesome.
you peace. It's all of those things. And I think like whenever I try to move through life, and especially if I'm making like a tough decision, I like think about what is the path that's going to give me the most peace of mind, because anxiety has a purpose, and anxiety is made for you to survive. And if anxiety is bleeding into your world of thriving, then chances are you're not aligned to your values. And so I try to think about, okay, what is the path that is going to give me the most peace? And I try to think about stuff that way. So
yeah, exactly. I think about anxiety in the same way, where it's like, if I'm getting anxiety, I need to think about what's happening now, and then every step backwards to the root of it. And then you take care of that root of it, whatever that means. If it makes you anxious to be around people, just period, then what does that mean? That means like, okay, something about me being out with people. Let's start with me. Let's see what that is. Why does it make me anxious? Why? Okay, maybe because I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe because I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Okay, go back another step. What makes you feel like you need to say all the right things, do all the right things? Okay, what makes you think you're not saying good things?
Right.
What makes you think that those things are not good to begin with?
Right.
And you just keep going back and back and back and back, and eventually you'll find the root, and then you can deal with it any way that you want.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah. I learned that from playing the violin.
Just so hard.
Oh, yeah, it's difficult. That's a definite suffer instrument for sure.
I look at a violin and I'm like, no, I don't know where to start. And I look at a cello and I was like, that's a big violin,
It's
you
just
know?
a bigger box of screaming cats.
I'm like, supposed to put the string where? No, I'm just, you know what? Someone else will do it.
We're good. Yeah, yeah. I would rather be in Cirque du Soleil. But yeah, man, I was just thinking like, it's so dope to just, like be able to end on such a good note, but also be able to just have this energy that we're talking about today to guide me through the rest of the day or week or whatever. We're going to Mexico City pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take that energy with me there too.
Yeah. I mean, Mexico, I have there's a tenderness in my heart for Mexico. I think Mexico makes the best coffee. I think there's like the best chilies and peppers and spices in the world there. And also if you go back in history, Filipinos and Mexicans have a very we go way back. And so I think that Mexico's just a very, very special place. So I'm very excited for you guys to go on this trip. I've not been to Mexico City and I'm planning to make a visit soon, but I've only heard wonderful and great things. So yeah, I hope this energy carries on to the rest of your trip and that you have a wonderful and safe time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for tuning in as usual. This has been another deep talk, another shop talk, another deep talk at
Talking
the shop.
shop at Bubba's house.
Talking shop. But yeah, let's see who's on right now. No, I'm not trying to FaceTime anyone. Let's see. Whoops. No, not YouTube. Twitch.